Hi guys, I wanted to do this video talking about two of the biggest stories that are, we're all dealing with that are affecting our lives here. Most of what I try to do tends to bend toward the political, but obviously, as the old saying goes, everything is political. And coronavirus and its economic impact are absolutely some of the things that are the foremost presence in our minds right now on the world stage. And we see a lot of different governments taking different solutions, different paths on the in the attempt to tackle this issue. Not only with regards to facing the medical needs of their populations, but also the economic needs. And some countries are being far more effective at dealing with both of those issues than others. So I want to take a look at what the United States is doing with you, go over what we're doing wrong, and what we should be doing in order to more effectively deal with both of these issues. So, um, if you're in the United States and you're looking at the news, it's pretty clear that most of the stories that you see are about these two issues. And I think probably one of the things that's culturally, telling about the United States and where the priorities are just how much the economic component is a piece of the story. And when I say the economic component, I don't mean stories about individuals dealing with problems. They do always, of course, mention that, but the primary focus has usually been on stuff like how the Dow Jones is doing, what the market as a whole is doing, and how the economy is going to be suffering, and how investors will be dealing with obstacles like that. It's always, always, always a little bit more focused on essentially, you know, how this is going to hurt or help people who already have a lot of money. I feel like that's one of the areas that the United States continually gets wrong is an obsessive and focused effort to address and be aware of and to heal the wounds and concerns of the privileged. So, where are we at here? In the United States today, we have over 18,022 deaths as of as of April 11th. And we're shooting this early in the morning, so I'm sure we're going to see a lot of updates, once we get the morning news coming in. But yeah, over 18,000, a number that will probably double inside of a week, right? We're looking at a six-figure loss of human life before this is over. And right alongside that, we see that in around February, roughly around Valentine's Day of this year, we had a stock value in the Dow Jones, if you want to look at that with me here. So I'll be able to share it with you guys on screen eventually, but not yet. I don't have that technology, but what you see around Valentine's Day and a couple days after that is that the Dow Jones was over 29,000, just under 30,000 at its height. And then basically within about a month of that, like February 20th range where it was really at its height, we see in March 23rd it hit a bottom of 18,591. So it lost an enormous amount of its value, almost half. And in a response to that, around that time and since, we have seen a series of three bills get pushed through that all functionally did mostly the same thing, which was make trillions and trillions of dollars available to America's largest companies in an attempt to bail them out, much like we saw, about 12 years ago in the 2008 recession. So the United States is getting a lot of things wrong, and what it ultimately boils down to is an extremely zealous devotion to supply side economics as the solution to all of our problems. And what we're finding is that countries who choose a different path with regards to their medical concerns, their healthcare industry, with regards to how they are choosing to spend emergency relief money, they're getting much different results, much better results than the United States is getting. So, I want to pull up this Bloomberg article here for you guys real quick. I want to just, that's going to help us address some of this. Bear with me a second here. Here we go. Yeah, so the United States currently has the largest number of cases. I mean, we're looking at just under 500,000 people who are infected with this. A substantial portion in areas like New York City, California, New Jersey, etc., and a couple other places. But yeah, I mean, it's a very high concentration, more than any place else in the world. It looks like Spain also has a very high number of cases, but clearly proportionately less, for a population perspective. Okay, so. Right. So globally, we also just hit 100,000 deaths. So the United States, with only roughly, I think it was 5.5% of the world's population, has 20% of the fatalities. That gives you a sense of just how badly a for-profit healthcare system has been handling this situation. And the reason for that is pretty significant. It's just simple as this. When people are not sure that they should go to the doctor financially, they tend not to go. And when people who should go to the doctor don't, they die. And they also, in this case, spread a virus that can kill other people for much longer than they would have if they had known they should have gone to the doctor. Viruses, and if you've watched a lot of this, you may very well know all of this already, but it's pretty clear that the concept of exponential growth means that every day a person is infected and continuing to interact with others is a day that they spread it to more and more people. And ultimately, we're seeing the proof, no matter what Joe Biden tells you or anybody else who is a strong advocate of for-profit healthcare. We're seeing the results in real time that our approach is less effective than countries that are using, universal healthcare. They're seeing fewer cases per capita. They're seeing fewer deaths in many instances. And ultimately, while no system is perfect, clearly ours is worse. Now, there are certain populations, like in Italy and Iran, who are facing unique challenges. Italy has an older population with a lot of former or current smokers, and that quickly caused a lot of deaths among people in that category who were very high risk. They just simply had a culturally high risk population that made them more susceptible to the virus. And as for Iran, they are experiencing trade embargoes and all sorts of restrictions on resources that make them almost uniquely incapable of servicing the people that are in their emergency rooms and dealing with the things they need, because they just lack the supplies even more so than other countries. So the United States is doing worse than countries that have the entire Western civilization blocking things from getting into their borders, and worse than countries that have enormously high population of older smokers who are especially susceptible to the disease or to the virus. So that just gives you a sense of just how much of a disadvantage it is to have a for-profit system in a time where, a non-profit is what we really need. Now, as I said, we addressed this issue financially by trying to tackle, struggling companies and prop them up. The issue that goes with that. And ultimately, we're doing this wrong. We're sending the money in the wrong direction. A lot of other countries have taken on, a series of bills that basically made sure that every single person received a substantial, income to keep them afloat during this time. The United States has taken a lot of, I wouldn't even call them half measures, but, clearly at the very best half measures to help the average American put money in their pocket. And most importantly, they haven't done enough to ensure confidence that there will be more money coming. Rather than establish a form of universal basic income, even if it was to say guaranteed for 6 months, they have only instead chosen to give us a one-time payment that they've taken a month to deliver, and there's no promise. There's no promise that the fourth bill that they're working on will, in fact, contain anything like that, or that it will have any kind of repetition, a minimum guarantee. That is very problematic, and the effect that it has is it causes a collapse in consumer confidence. In fact, we have seen the biggest drop ever in consumer confidence index in this year as a result of this pandemic. So in the Bloomberg article here from the 9th of April, they talk about how, let's see, the University of Michigan's preliminary sentiment index plummeted 18.1 points to 71, according to data Thursday. The measure stands at its lowest since 2011 and was weaker than the median projection of 75 in a Bloomberg survey of economists. The gauge of current conditions slid by the most on record to 72.4, while a measure of expectations dropped 9.7 points to 70. So what they're describing here is they're saying how well they think how much consumer confidence there is in the current market and how well people think it's going to be later. To give you a frame of reference, before all of this was going on, before all the worst of this was happening, we were seeing numbers that were over 100. So we've seen a dramatic decline, something like 30% roughly, a little more than that, in the consumer confidence index. Now, if you're looking at the consumer confidence index with an over 30% drop, and you're looking at the Dow Jones with a 40% drop, you might be thinking to yourself, gee, isn't it coincidental that the exact time that consumer confidence in the economy collapsed, so too did the stock market? So wouldn't it make more sense that what we would want to do is prop up consumer confidence by making sure that they were guaranteed to have the money they need to buy things, which might make them more inclined to buy things in the economy? That would make sense, and that's what a lot of companies or countries did. They made sure to give guaranteed money for a certain period of time, 3 months, 4 months, whatever it was. They guaranteed paychecks for an extended period of time. America didn't do that. We gave unemployment benefits to certain people, but you had to jump through a bunch of hoops. We gave you one check for a little bit of money that probably doesn't cover your rent, right? Well past the date your rent is even due. We didn't suspend all payments for mortgages and rent, just for mortgages, so most people who are renting are still out of luck. So we have all of these gaps and loopholes that were specifically unbeneficial components for poor people. All of the stuff that helps the already better off, the people who own property, who have, investments and businesses, these folks were better taken care of. In the countries where we didn't see that happen, the economy isn't taking as much of a hit. And if it is, it's mostly because the United States economy is an incredibly important part of global economy. All right, so here's the solution. If we need to get the economy back on track, we need to get consumer confidence up. The only way to get consumer confidence up is for consumers to have spending power and to have confidence that they're going to continue to have spending power. If the United States wants to catch up with the rest of the world, and it doesn't want to fall behind, it doesn't want to become, well, whatever it is that a superpower isn't. Whatever it is when you're not a superpower anymore, a fallen power. If we don't want to see China surpass us, because that's very likely to happen as we continue to struggle and they recover very quickly, then we need to take the measures that actually work. And supply-side economics just aren't working. We did see a rebound in the stock market. We saw, so in the last, little stretch here, in the last few weeks, we saw it come back up a little bit, which is great, great for the roughly 40-something% of Americans that actually own stock. It's now back up to a 23,719 as of April 9th. And so, it came back up about 5,000 points. even though it had previously been 7,000 and change higher than that. So that might sound like we're recovering, but it's not true. Because according to that same Bloomberg article, 70% of the US economy is based on service industry. And the service industry is the hardest hit industry in this situation. So while we have transferred trillions of dollars over to large companies who are mostly cash rich and didn't really even need it, and in fact, I have a whole list of top 10 companies, and many of which are on the list of companies that are receiving this money that they don't need. The people who are actually being most hardest hit are going to ultimately see no benefit of that. In a recent study from, oh no, where is it from? It was a 2017 study on the stock market, and basically what they determined, and you know what, maybe I can find it real quick here. I'm going to pause you guys just 1 second. Okay, here it is. So basically, this is a money.com article that references a paper by an NYU professor, Professor Wolf, with 2 F's. Basically, he found out that the top 10% of Americans, the wealthiest 10%, owns 84% of all stocks. And essentially what that means is that when the stock market goes up, sorry for the camera shake, or the stock market goes down, it really only benefits almost all the impact hits only 10% of Americans. So when we see the stock moving up and down, the market moving up and down, sure, it has a sort of delayed reaction effect on some portion of the 90% beneath that group, in that less investment could lead to less, growth in certain respects. But clearly, the most important component of businesses doing well is consumers participating in and purchasing with that business, doing business with them. If we lack consumer confidence, if we lack resources amongst the majority of Americans, there's going to be no movement forward for any of us. And that's what demand economics is. If you have money in the market, if people can afford to buy things, they will, and the market will be successful. It makes perfect sense. And we're seeing, now you can argue with Republicans about this all the time. You'll see it in, they'll say, well, we like this, but it just makes more sense. You can't create jobs without money, and you need to give investors money so they can create jobs. But it's like, yeah, but our philosophy is, well, they won't create jobs unless you give them, business, and so you need to have consumers that can afford to do business with them that create the jobs. So that's been the argument back and forth for a long time. We're now seeing in real time, zoomed in, like fast forwarded, rapid reaction that when you pumped trillions of dollars into the stock market, it went up and then it went right back down again. Because it didn't matter that more money was coming in. What mattered was whether they felt that people in the country would be willing to do business with those companies. And if they don't, investors get out because they know that demand economics is what really drives the economy. And then they sell you supply economics so that they can take that money from you. So if we're going to fix the economy, we need to start using demand economics more. If we're going to fix the virus situation, we need to start using demand economics more. And that means Medicare for all. That means direct cash payments to consumers, not to businesses that are cash rich. You have to look at the data to see what works and what doesn't. And as a person who used to be a Republican as a matter of looking for what I had believed was the best way to approach solving business, or I should say, the best way to do business, to focus on business as the driving force in what policies you should be in support of. That's why I'm a progressive today. I saw the data, and the data says that when you try and use supply-side economics, it fails. And now that we've seen in just a 2-month window a perfect example of supply-side economics trying to solve a problem and failing, we have all the information we need and we have no excuses. Because if supply side worked, then all we would have needed to do was pump enough cash into those companies and everything would be hunky-dory again. But that's not the reality we live in right now. And if you're in a situation where you're out of work and you have no jobs coming in, and you're aware of the fact that there's 16 million unemployed with a projected 20 to 35 million by the end of the year, or by 12 months from when this all started happening, then you know that this is not a situation that you can easily bounce back from. So we really need to get realistic about what works and what doesn't, and we need to start demanding these things from our leaders. So that's it for now, and I'll see you next time.